A project meeting is already running late when the tone shifts. A proposal is challenged directly, not with hesitation, but with a clear statement that something isn't working. There's no pause to soften it, no visible attempt to redirect the conversation. The room adjusts quickly. Some people lean in, others go quiet. What stands out is not just the disagreement itself, but how openly it appears, almost as if this kind of exchange is expected. In other situations, the same kind of disagreement might take a different path. Instead of direct opposition, it might show up as silence, or as a suggestion that circles around the issue. But here, the conflict is surfaced immediately. The behavior isn't random. It tends to emerge in environments where the cost of delay is more visible than the discomfort of confrontation. When people operate under time pressure or shared responsibility, unresolved ambiguity becomes harder to tolerate. A vague agreement can slow down decisions, introduce risk, or shift responsibility in unclear ways. In these contexts, addressing conflict directly becomes less about personal expression and more about reducing uncertainty. The behavior appears repeatedly in teams where outcomes depend on coordination, product development, emergency response, technical troubleshooting. In each case, clarity carries practical weight. This doesn't mean individuals are more confrontational by nature. Instead, the environment changes what feels like the safer option. Avoiding conflict may reduce immediate tension, but it can increase long-term risk. Directly addressing an issue may feel uncomfortable in the moment, but it stabilizes expectations more quickly. Over time, people begin to adjust their behavior based on which outcome the environment rewards. There are also subtle signals that guide this shift. In some settings, direct disagreement is met with engagement questions, revisions, alternative ideas. In others, it may be ignored or quietly penalized. These responses accumulate. People observe what happens after someone speaks up. If direct input consistently leads to progress, it becomes easier to repeat. If it leads to social friction without resolution, it becomes something to avoid. Decision shortcuts play a role here as well. When people enter a familiar environment, they don't analyze every interaction from scratch. They rely on patterns they've seen before. If a workplace consistently resolves issues through open debate, individuals may default to directness. Without consciously evaluating each situation, the behavior becomes efficient not because it is always comfortable, but because it aligns with what has worked. At the same time, direct conflict often carries its own structure. It is rarely chaotic. There are usually implicit boundaries: what can be challenged, how it can be expressed, and when it is considered appropriate. These boundaries are learned through repeated exposure. A new member in the same environment may initially hesitate, watching how others phrase disagreements, how strongly they push, and how the group responds. Outside of structured environments, the same individuals may behave differently. In social settings where relationships are less defined by shared outcomes, the cost of direct conflict can outweigh the benefits. Maintaining harmony may preserve long-term interaction, even if it leaves certain issues unaddressed. The behavior shifts, not because the person changes, but because the context redefines what feels stable. There is also a signaling aspect to direct conflict. In some groups, speaking openly signals engagement, competence, or commitment to the outcome. Remaining silent might be interpreted as disengagement. In these cases, directness becomes a way of participating, not just disagreeing. It shows that someone is actively processing information and willing to contribute to the resolution. Over time, small adjustments accumulate. A person who initially avoids direct confrontation may begin to test it in low-risk situations. A brief disagreement, a clarifying question, a more explicit response. If these moments lead to clearer outcomes without negative consequences, the behavior expands. If not, it contracts again. The shift is gradual, shaped by feedback that is often indirect. Even within the same environment, the form of direct conflict can vary. Some interactions are concise and technical, focusing strictly on the issue. Others include more context, framing the disagreement within shared goals. These variations reflect different ways of balancing clarity. With social stability, neither approach is fixed, both adjust. Depending on timing, urgency, and the people involved. What becomes noticeable is not just when conflict is addressed directly, but how consistently it happens in certain patterns. Specific contexts seem to lower the threshold for speaking up, while others raise it. The difference is rarely explained explicitly. It is learned through observation, reinforced through repetition, and carried forward as an expectation. And in those moments when someone chooses to speak directly, it may not be a sudden act of boldness, but the result of a series of small, accumulated signals about what is allowed, what is effective, and what keeps the situation from becoming uncertain for too long.